American University in Bulgaria.
Well, welcome to this lecture, part of the Balkansky-Penitz Distinguished Lecture Series, which you probably all know because you saw the poster. My name is Robert Fortner, in case you don't know me. Most of you do, because you suffer in my classes. But I'm a member of the JMC faculty, and we have a few others over here who have come. And it's my honor to introduce our speaker tonight. Can anyone guess where he's from? Yes, Diane.
America.
Well, I mean, more specifically than that.
Chicago.
Not exactly.
Urbana-Champaign.
You've heard of this place, right? I don't know how to say this. It's not too obvious where he's from, right? Anyway, University of Illinois. University of Illinois is in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. It's in some respects not so different than Volgograd. It's a relatively small community. The only big difference being that the university is something like 45 times our size or something like that. So there's a lot more students there. I did my doctoral work at the University of Illinois in what's called the Institute of Communications Research, which he also has here under his name. And if you put two and two together there, you can probably guess that he was one of my professors. I had him as a professor before he became rich and famous. Well, famous anyway. One of the first graduate students after he finished his degree work to study with him in the area of ethics, and for some odd reason, we've been friends ever since, mostly because he's willing to laugh at my jokes and most people are not. His wife and he are the godparents of our children, because they, in my wife and my view, we had our first child while I was a graduate student. Couldn't think of any other couple that we would rather entrust our new son to than Cliff and Priscilla. And they were lucky enough never to have to make good on that promise to take them should anything befall us. And I think for that they have been eternally grateful. Cliff has written extensively, essentially in two areas. One is in the philosophy of technology. He did his doctoral dissertation on Jacques Ellul, a French jurist and philosopher who was very prolific in his writing about the impacts of technology, or what he called la technique, on Western society. And then the other area that he has concentrated on mostly, I think, even more than that, has been the area of media ethics. I don't know if anyone has ever referred to him this way, but I always think of him as the father of media ethics study in the United States. He's written 10 or so books. He's not counting anymore, so we're not quite sure. And one of those is in the 9th edition, so maybe it's 20, who knows. Anyway, it's a lot. And he's contributed to a variety of other books and academic journal articles. He's been a journal editor. And he's been a terrific friend. The last couple of books that I've worked on with another colleague, Mark Fackler, he contributed 4 essays to, one of which is still missing, by the way. And I'm sure that you'll enjoy everything that he has to say tonight on this topic of truth in the age of global media. So,
thank you, my host and colleague, Robert Fortner. Nobody gives introductions more generously and better than he does, and I'm the beneficiary and grateful for it. It's a high privilege to be on this campus, to be welcomed here, and given an opportunity to discuss ethics in an age of global media. I believe the liberal arts, international liberal arts that your university represents and is known for around the world for its excellence, is the context in which ethics, media technology, and career preparation for the professionals can be best understood. It's a special privilege to be welcomed here by the Bolskansky-Penatska Institute for Advanced Study, and for its program chair, Professor Jean Crambois. I am most grateful, and to the staff. So tonight, I give my special recognition to Professor Robert Fortner, to our provost who is here, Cyrus Reed, to Professor Jean Crambois, but also to the faculty and students of this excellent university, AUBG. Truth in the age of the global media. We easily use the term global, but the concept of globalization is in a crisis. For all the promise of this electronic age, there's a meltdown sociologically. The range between rich and poor is higher than ever. The growth of fundamentalism and extremism makes democracy nearly impossible. Education is cut back while consumerism prospers. An Iranian student has unlocked the digital system of 300,000 computers in his home country and claims to have the algorithms for the encryption of both Google and Yahoo, putting the financial world in a crisis. Global technology is creating upheavals in media institutions, but the growth of information during this age is dazzling nonetheless. Ultra-fast multimedia corporations are organizing societies, with governments becoming secondary. Mobile phones, Facebook, and satellites are burgeoning and effacing national borders. Geography has been organized, and you know it, by political power, east and west, empires first and second, at odds with each other, in the so-called rest of the world, labeled an inferior third. But now we are ordering the globe through electronic media systems. And given Bulgaria's complicated political history, you have a special interest in the world's realignment technologically. Regrettably, we haven't had an international ethics to match our global technologies. Rupert Murdoch's News Corporation, with 64,000 employees, is designed to meet today's world challenges. But the phone hacking scandal in Britain and mushrooming allegations elsewhere have discredited it as immoral to its structural core. By what standard should today's technology regimes be held accountable? If we call the media enterprise to judgment, what is the legitimate norm? A host of ethical issues are becoming transparent within the international communication system. Some are new moral problems, and others are being transformed, but the centerpiece ought to be truth. A believable concept of truthfulness is the master principle today in news, in public relations advertising, in information systems, ICTs, and social media. The convergence of digital platforms is new, Therefore, do we need a new ethics? I answer that question in the negative. The venerable concept of truth should be at the front of the information revolution. But our challenge is not just the concept of truthfulness, but truth that can prosper in a technological age. Truth as authentic disclosure. Truth is under attack from everywhere. Clearly, it's in a predicament, and undoubtedly in your mind, too. However, instead of abandoning the idea, we ought to recover and redefine it. The Western definition of truth as accuracy is not an international concept. When we understand truth within the global media network, the richest terms, I believe, are the Hebrew ameth and the Greek aletheia. Ameth, genuine, authentic. Aletheia, openness, disclosure. Combining the Hebrew and the Greek, authentic disclosure is the meaning of truth as understood across the human family. In Serbo-Croatian, the true is justified as with a plumb line in carpentry. Truth is one of the three highest values in Latin American communication. For Václav Havel, the mystery of being is known only through the truth. In Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha, the power of truth through the human spirit eventually wins over force. And for the Danish Søren Kierkegaard, truth is subjective. And Imo Brunner of Germany spoke of truth as encounter. In the Jewish Talmud, the liar's punishment is that no one believes them. The fundamental norm of Arab-Islamic communication is truthfulness. In Hinduism, truth is the highest dharma, and truth is the source of all other virtues. In the powerful wheel imagery of the Buddhist tradition, truth is the immovable axis. And again, a meth in the Hebrew scriptures, the true is genuine, authentic. In aletheia in the New Testament, to speak the truth is to open up the inside, to disclose the heart of the matter. Truth is not pure fact or precise data, but seeing beneath the surface, beneath the turbulent surface of everyday affairs. Truth means to strike gold, to get at the core, the essence, the nub, the heart of the matter. And now to illustrate. The French social philosopher Jacques Ellul speaks the truth about our technological age. He looks below the surface, goes below it, to disclose the meaning of the technological age underneath. There have always been technologies in history. Pharaoh's chariots chased after Israel. The Romans ruled the Western world through highways and sophisticated armies. The wheel, hoe, water bucket, technologies among humans always, but now it's a technological order. For technology to be understood, according to Ellul, one must see it in terms of Engel's law. As quantity increases, quality changes. A village of 1,000 is not just on a numerical continuum to a city of 1 million. A quantitative shift occurs as the numbers increase and quality changes so that what one sees at the beginning and the end are of two different kinds. Living in the city of Sofia, fundamentally different from a small village in Bulgaria. So while technologies have always been used, the 20th century saw a quantum shift to a different order. Ellul's law in terms of angles, from technological products to technological systems, from tools to a technological commonwealth. In Ellul's classic, The Technological Society, the infrastructure conforms to la technique. He sees the spirit of machineness underneath it. The problem for industrial nations is not technological products per se, but the dynamics of efficiency, its mystique that underlies them. Like heatness in red-hot iron, la technique permeates everywhere. The world of means expands in size and speed. We are engineering wizards, he says. Human ends become shriveled and mysterious. La technique and moral judgments are mutually exclusive. La technique is a guillotine decapitating moral virtues. As he puts it, in the ancient days, we cut out the eyes of nightingales in order to make them sing better. And so today we skewer our commitments and ethics for the machine-like imperative of efficiency. In industrial societies, the instrumental worldview buries into our philosophy of life. It invades our spirit. It eats its way into our being. Let me introduce Ellul by showing a segment of The Betrayal by Technology. In a world of means where human ends are squeezed away, the moral life loses its relevance.
Précisément à cause de l'efficacité, la technique est une augmentation de la puissance et aussi des risques. Puisque nous disions, on cherche l'efficacité, on ne regarde rien d'autre, donc on peut augmenter des risques. Et augmentation de la puissance, augmentation des risques, il faudrait que l'homme soit lui-même changé et assez maître de lui pour arriver à dominer cette puissance et peut-être à ne pas tout utiliser et d'autre part à éviter les risques. Il faudrait autrement dit que l'homme change vite pour utiliser bien, je ne dis pas efficacement, je dis bien la technique. Et il faudrait que se produise ce que le philosophe français Bergson, il y a bien longtemps, en 1930, avait dit, plus la puissance de l'homme augmentera, plus il est important que l'homme ait un supplément d'âme, que son âme soit améliorée en quelque sorte. Mais si l'homme continue à n'avoir qu'une idée, c'est la puissance, et on lui donne les moyens de cette puissance, il va l'utiliser le plus rapidement possible, sans tenir aucun compte. La technique ne supporte pas qu'on la juge. C'est-à-dire, les techniciens ne supportent pas qu'on porte un jugement éthique, moral, sur ce qu'ils font. Et pourtant, porter des jugements éthiques, des jugements moraux, des jugements spirituels, c'était ça, la plus haute liberté de l'homme. Or, je suis privé de ma plus haute liberté. C'est-à-dire que je peux faire, moi, tous les discours que je veux sur la technique, les techniciens, ça leur est complètement égal. Ils ne changeront rien à ce qu'ils sont en train de faire, ce qu'ils ont décidé de faire et ce qu'ils sont conditionnés à faire. Car le technicien n'est pas libre, il est conditionné. Il est conditionné à la fois par son éducation, par les pratiques qu'il a, et puis par l'objectif à atteindre. Il n'est absolument pas libre dans l'exercice de sa technique, il fait ce que la technique exige. Voilà pourquoi je pense qu'il y a un conflit entier entre la liberté et la technique.
Ellul illustrates for me the truthfulness as authentic disclosure, which I defined at the beginning. You see on the screen in translation the word technology, but in French it's la technique. He's thinking of machineness that underlies the machines and tools, and his ability to penetrate through to the heart of the issue is what I believe authentic disclosure means. Efficiency is everything, says Ellul. Human ends are buried under a preoccupation with means. We do what technology demands of us. Humans must fit into the technological order like the panels together engineered into a building's dome. Technology and freedom contradict each other. You know, for someone in ethics, the meaning is profound. The argument, as he sees it, is that in our secular age, enamored of machines, life becomes amoral, that is, devoid of moral categories. In a technocratic era, we face a conundrum, not the violation of norms, first of all, but a vacuum of normlessness. Rose bushes do not grow at the North Pole, and morality has no root in emptiness. So we live with what he calls an instrumental worldview. Moral purpose sacrificed to technical excellence, and media technologies lurch from one crisis to another with an empty center. With Pontius Pilate scoffing at truth, Hegel believing in the truth of the organic gestalt, and the late Jacques Derrida claiming truth is impossible in an arbitrary world of sliding signs. Truth as authentic disclosure will be misunderstood. Nevertheless, aletheia is our operating ideal, the trademark of media ethics. Ellul is an example of an academic seeing beneath the surface and getting to the heart of the matter. And I trust the Institute will become known as promoting scholarship of this fundamental kind. I now introduce 3 illustrations from the media. In example 1, international satellite news, Al-Jazeera, the Arab news network founded in Qatar in 1996. Al-Jazeera received status and prominence during the Iraq War. Al-Jazeera had a network office in Baghdad since its beginning, and the voice of Saddam Hussein when he was in power was often heard on Al-Jazeera. When U.S. President Bush was in office, he condemned it as a platform for terrorists, the television home of Osama bin Laden, violator of the Geneva Conventions by showing prisoners of war and corpses on the screen, a sea of blood, the mangled faces of the wounded beyond all human decency. For Western critics, propaganda and not news. But Al-Jazeera, likewise reviled by authoritarian governments across the Middle East, in a region where Arab leaders control media systems and unflattering portrayals of leaders are unacceptable, the independent Al-Jazeera is an outrage. Saudi Arabia bars Al-Jazeera from its territory. Algiers has cut its signal. Yemen authorities confiscated its equipment. Morocco has blocked it from the airwaves. During the protest in Egypt, the government condemned it as the chief culprit in fueling unrest. Al-Jazeera's office in Cairo was burned to the ground, and its bureau chief and 7 correspondents arrested. Al-Jazeera, born in war and centered on turmoil ever since, does it meet the truth standard for news? Is it the home of sensation and bias rather than of aletheia? When the Iraq bombing campaign began, Al-Jazeera was already on the ground and had nearly exclusive rights to the sounds and images.
بغداد بغداد
شجعاني من الفتيان والفتيات
بغداد بغداد
صوت مالك
وين المايك ماجد؟
ايوه نعم سامعك والله نفس المايك فخم النور.
في شيء عندك؟ بغداد؟
قصفوا الان 3 صواريخ متتالية على هدف واحد.
اوكي عنده 3 صواريخ قصف يقول لك. خيت.
Yes, they failed to get Saddam. See, what they were hoping for is 40 cruise missiles falling on Baghdad, then 400 paratroopers going in and finishing the job. Well, that failed. They bombed this place in northern Iraq.
Smashed completely.
Pulverized. Dead bodies in mass. I mean, why?
We got the pictures and we show them.
We'll show the
but
pictures.
we give.
Of course, we'll get grief from the Americans for showing these pictures because we'll just will be inciting rebellion and will be basically instigating anti-American sentiments. I mean, I'm sorry. They can't have their cake and eat it. I mean, yeah, okay, you are the most powerful nation on earth. I agree. You can defeat everybody. I agree. You can crush everybody. I agree. But don't ask us to love it as well.
But the question is, who's going to stop her? Or to stop the United States? Who's going to do that? You need a new group. You need a powerful group.
The United States is going to stop the United States. I have absolute confidence in the American Constitution. And I have absolute confidence in the ability of the American people. The United States people are going to stop the United States in time.
Make way, make way, come on. Make way, make way, make way, make way.
Civilian casualties are being reported on the battlefield through a number of sources. We regret the loss of any civilians on the battlefield, and we've done all that we can reasonably do to prevent that from happening either from the air or on the ground. But we know for certain that there have been civilians killed in this operation because of the decisions taken by the regime to put them out in front, to hide behind them, to use pregnant women to blow up cars at checkpoints. We've seen this happen on the battlefield. Those are not being investigated by us at this point in time. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day.
Al-Jazeera is an international news network now that rivals the size of the BBC and CNN. You see in this episode, as it's covering the beginning of the Iraq War, the same policies and procedures that every network adheres to. Their equipment is there. They listen to Central Command. Their reporters walk alongside the other ones. They distinguish the editorial commentary from reporting itself. Now, in terms of its sophistication as a technology, let's try and understand it within the context of the war reporting out of which it was born. Does it tell the truth about Iraq, as you see on the screen, and now Afghanistan? Was it the truthful voice of the Arab Spring? In its sophisticated television and satellite form, does it get caught in the instrumentalism of the technological order, following technological imperatives, that is, going wherever technology, its cameras, lead it, and therefore define news? Or is it seeing under the surface? Does it meet the standard of aletheia? Now again, the issue is not objectivity, neutrality. That is, whether it's propaganda or information. The question is authentic disclosure. Now obviously Al-Jazeera cannot meet the truth standard across the board on all occasions. Nothing is more demanding than war coverage from Afghanistan early on, then Iraq, the Arab Spring, and Syria now. And no reporters always get it right. But is Al Jazeera propagandistic or truthful overall? Well, journalists who do not speak Arabic struggle with the local language and culture of the Middle East. Al Jazeera's reporters are on the scene, among the people, speaking the language, knowing the customs. Its code of ethics clearly separates news from commentary and opinion. True, blood is part of the story. Its bloodiness is grislier than shown on television news before. But the faces of the dead and the broken bodies, says its senior producer, are not contrived by Al Jazeera. War has a human cost. We don't minimize it as collateral damage. Reports and visuals from cameras and microphones of the guns and bombs without probing beneath the surface are not in themselves authentic disclosure. That is, getting to the heart of the matter. Does the fundamental issue underneath the surface come into view? That is, whether the wars in the Middle East are just or not. Do they meet just war criteria? Do the media open to the audience the issues on that level, those that the audience needs to understand, to know? Whether, for instance, the U.S. military intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan can be justified morally. During the Iraq invasion, Bulgaria's Sarajevo was the principal refueling station for the aircraft, the bombers. Bulgaria deployed troops as part of the multinational force. So your country has to answer that question too. And again, the highest possible standard for news. Do you enable Al Jazeera for your viewing audience to see beneath the technological surface of all the bombs and drama to the fundamental issue of whenever or wherever war can be justified. Al-Jazeera English started in 2006, has 4 headquarters in Doha, of course, then Washington, London, and Kuala Lumpur. The Daily News Hour is hosted from these 4 locations linked together live, the news essentially following the day around the planet. Al-Jazeera English, a tremendous impact on the world of international reporting. And so it's held to the same fundamental standard as all news should be, in my judgment. Will truth, aletheia, be its standard in war and political conflict, seeing the issue as just war or nonviolence? Will Al-Jazeera English present the world of nonviolence with the sophistication of a Gandhi, a Václav Havel, and Martin Luther King? A second example from the media that teaches us about truth as aletheia. And this one is from photojournalism. Kevin Carter grew up in Johannesburg, South Africa, his parents English immigrants. He dedicated his career as a photojournalist with the London Daily Mail to human suffering. Appalled with apartheid, he was committed to covering the South African townships. His news beat was not the political elite and Afrikaner businessmen, but the 80% native population living under apartheid's brutality. In March 1993, on leave from the Daily Mail to cover malnutrition in the Sudan, he made what some have called the best technical photo ever published. You undoubtedly have seen it. Outside a UN feeding station, this starving Sudanese girl is broken down in exhaustion, whimpering, fetal in posture, a hooded vulture waiting her death. Carter watched the scene from the forest edge for 20 minutes until the images were exactly right. Then he took the photo, chased the vulture away, and went back into the forest to smoke cigarettes and weep. The photo won him the Pulitzer Prize for feature photography, the King in Journalism Awards. This was July 1994. 2 months later, he committed suicide in Johannesburg at the age 33 with exhaust films from his pickup truck near a riverside where he played as a child. In his suicide note, the words are debated until today. The pain of life overrides the joy to the point that joy does not exist. The pain of life overrides the joy to the point that joy does not exist. Did he mean the rejection he suffered after the Pulitzer Prize for not helping the child? Apparently more interested in the awards to follow than laying his camera down and carrying her to the relief camp nearby, bombarded by people all over the world. What happened to the girl? I do not know. Or did he mean that the accumulated burden of representing South Africa's suffering over his career and his intensity as a photojournalist in his assignment left him without the joy one needs to exist? On the question of truth in the electronic age, Kevin Carter lived and died with the mainstream definition of truth. This photo is not aletheia, truth on the deeper level of meaning underneath. Carter represents truth as raw fact, a mirror of reality. Newspapers who printed it judged the photograph's quality on that basis, and the Pulitzer Board gave its highest award possible because they had limited the definition of truth to objectivity. But aletheia, authentic disclosure, insists on truth in context, on thick description, on seeing beneath the surface to the heart of the matter. Interpretive sufficiency, it is sometimes called, a deeper reading of the little girl's suffering by communicating the attitudes, culture, language, and definitions of the people and events actually being covered. The news media disclosing the depth and the nuance that enable readers and viewers to identify the fundamental issues of justice themselves. For aletheia, the story should not be released unless the context is elaborated. That is, Sudan's civil war at the time, inadequate responses from the world community, whether the child's parents were close at hand finding food for her. Aletheia cannot condone this photo, but one after he carried her to the food camp, assuming this is the right way to handle her brittle body, or photos of the village Ayad, where apparently she was from. In the aesthetics of aletheia, stories that produce only pity or fear are unacceptable. Their purpose instead is catharsis or healing. And a third example from the news media that teaches us about truth as disclosure: WikiLeaks. Nowhere today has the truth issue been more pronounced than in WikiLeaks.org, the website launched by Australian Julian Assange in 2006 that publishes classified data leaked from government and business. WikiLeaks has documented toxic dumping in Africa's Ivory Coast that caused massive illness and a dozen deaths. In November 2010, WikiLeaks released 250,000 secret diplomatic cables from the U.S. State Department. And in March 2011, it leaked 1 million secret documents from governments and corporations in Asia, the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the former Soviet bloc. It has released nearly 2 million leaks on every topic imaginable, from classified government material to financial records of banks and companies. Video from a U.S. Army Apache helicopter shows the killing of 2 Reuters reporters and 10 unarmed Iraqis, an example of the 90,000 plus documents that Bradley Manning, a U.S. military soldier, released to WikiLeaks.
more that keep walking by, and one of them has a weapon.
Roger, received, target.
Okay. 208. See all those people standing down there?
Stand by. Roger. Stay firm. And open the courtyard.
Yeah, Roger. I just estimated there's probably about 20 of them. There's, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Back over here, 6-1, or correct, Banner's 1-4, route 2-3.
I don't know if that's...
Neighbor's Mess Element, copy at White 6.
That's a weapon.
Yeah. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18.
We'll call for change by Charlie Mike Bravo.
Speed 37.
I'm Red White 6, Bushmaster 6 Romeo. Roger.
Fucking break.
Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18. Have individuals with weapons.
4 radio.
Rio Banner's 1-4, route.
Yep, he's got a weapon too. Hotel 26, Crazy Horse 18. Have 5 to 6 individuals with AK-47s. Request permission to engage.
Roger that. We have no personnel east of our position, so you are free to engage over.
All right, we'll be engaging.
Roger, go ahead. I can't get them now because they're behind that building.
Any Bushmaster Element, copy.
We got an RPG.
All right, we got a guy with an RPG.
I'm going to fire.
Okay. No, hold on. Let's come around behind buildings right now from our point of view. Yeah, we're going to come around and get him from
I saw an individual with RPG getting ready to fire.
Yeah, we got a guy shooting. Now he's behind the building.
God damn it.
Speed coming around.
Negative. He was right in front of the Brad. About there 1 o'clock. Haven't seen anything since then.
Just fucking, once you get on, just open them up.
Okay, Roger. I see your element. You got about 4 Humvees out along this.
You're clear.
All right, firing.
Line here. What's the space line? Let me know when you gather.
We're shooting. Light them all up.
202 traffic, 260.
Come on, fire.
Hey, Roger.
Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
Bushmaster 2-6. We need to move time now.
All right, we just engaged all 8 individuals.
Yeah, we got 2 birds. We're still firing.
Roger.
Got him.
6 is a 2-6. We'll move, but we got 13.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on
bypass.
God damn it, Kyle.
All right. I hit him by head. All right, you're clear.
All right, I'm just trying to find targets again.
Bushmaster 6, this is Bushmaster 2-6.
Got a bunch of bodies laying there.
All right, we got about 8 individuals.
Yeah, we got one guy crawling around down there, but we definitely got some. We're shooting some more.
Roger. Hey, you shoot out.
This video has now been seen by 12 million individuals. It's hidden in military archives. Reuters demanding to see it, believing that 2 of its reporters were shot accidentally by this very Apache helicopter. Refusal to release has led to misunderstanding and debate about the truth of this event until we see it. Now, our question for tonight is, what is truth in an international context as authentic disclosure? Supporters of WikiLeaks see its publication as truth-telling, pure and simple. Publishing improves transparency, and transparency creates a better society for all people, says the WikiLeaks website. Better scrutiny leads to reduced corruption. And WikiLeaks, upon its debut, audaciously announced to the world, we will crack it open. Will become a global watchdog more reliable than the conventional media. It's continued to call itself the first intelligence agency of the world. WikiLeaks says it provides the world with documents that corrupt and cheaters have tried to keep hidden from public view. Countries such as North Korea and Zimbabwe will no longer be able to censor its political affairs. WikiLeaks uses military-grade encryption to protect anonymity and to keep its servers in a bomb-proof underground bunker in Sweden. For the ethics of truth, a central issue is that of WikiLeaks' structure and policies. When WikiLeaks publishes the documents it receives, it does so in an indiscriminate data dump. It does not question the motives of those who steal and disclose corporate or government secrets. It does not redact the names of innocents who may find themselves in harm's way. WikiLeaks publishes online a massive number of reports without checking the facts or putting them in context. WikiLeaks quotes anonymous people you can't meet or verify. For truth is aletheia, the extreme of censorship is unacceptable. That is, a refusal to consider this new technology for any reason whatsoever. Over the last years, it's been issued legal challenges by religious groups in the Swiss bank Julius Baer Holding. It is impounded by the British Ministry of Defense. The governments of Israel, Russia, China, and Vietnam have all blocked access or impeded its operations. But for aletheia, the raw and naked release of material as an information flow is unacceptable too. For aletheia, authentic disclosure underneath the surface, WikiLeaks can be a jumping-off tool, an occasional source for fresh leads and old stories, but the mainstream version of truth, which leads to profusion, to release, to all the information you could possibly have, but not having it sorted out in the marketplace of ideas, would indicate that truth in context, or truth as authentic disclosure, is not being served. WikiLeaks is not the new international mode of investigative reporting, but actually depends on journalism's vitality. The New York Times, in this case, lived up to aletheia. The story of collateral damage appeared on page 1, but was on the lower left-hand bottom. And the Times added its own coverage. Collateral murder was only secondary. There was a photo taken from it that appeared on page 1, but it used 5 reporters. From its archives, the story was released the day it happened in 2007. The larger context of Army command and shoot rules, the relatively safe neighborhood in Baghdad where journalists often entered the city. An in-depth side story was included about Reuters' 2 news people, so they're no longer an X on the Apache camera, but stories about their commitment to photojournalism and their background and their way of understanding investigative reporting. Aletheia, the truth in context, rather than the sensationalism of raw footage, with WikiLeaks getting primary attention instead of the 12 people who died. Not merely an abundance of raw data, but another word for authentic disclosure, interpretive sufficiency. In conclusion, speaking the truth, aletheia, getting to the heart of the issue is enormously difficult in the global media age. Penetrating beneath the roiling surface is hard under any circumstances, and especially with sophisticated technology such as digital, satellite, and electronic visual. The overwhelming power of instrumentalism tends to trap technology within its efficiency, making us satisfied with means rather than ends. But with Ellul in academia and generally on Al-Jazeera, the truth emerged. Authentic meaning was disclosed. For Ellul, beneath the surface of this technological age, the true word is instrumental efficiency. Al-Jazeera insists on aletheia, the morality of war, the truth of just war theory, and to the extent that it does, it reports beneath the battle action and meets the standard aletheia. Using Kevin Carter's Pulitzer photo as a basis, one can imagine how coverage of malnutrition in the sub-Sahara ought to be done aletheia style. And the New York Times put the truth of the Army helicopter assault in context and made a deep reading possible. Journalists who practice aletheia are not doomsayers or self-righteous moralists. History is not a derelict arena where a lonely species struggles for survival. They cut through the surface to the issues underneath, but always with a constructive ambience. Their purpose is empowerment through disclosing the truth, not flagellation for its own sake. Global media technologies. Agents of truth. And here on this first-class campus, I'm grateful you're being educated in truth is aletheia. And the more one knows the liberal arts, the social sciences, and history and philosophy, and the insights of literature, the easier it is to get underneath the story and to make it available to the public so they can think and act as citizens should. Now, it's far from settled whether a credible version of truth-telling can be established in the turmoil and upheavals of our age. It's inspiring to me that the Institute's mission is scholarship of truth as authentic disclosure. And I consider this to be a worthwhile goal for educators, for researchers, for media professionals. Recovering aletheia as our master norm in public communications. Thank you for listening.
One complaint about students these days is that their attention span is about 30 seconds. That, laughing out loud has become LOL, probably has become probably. People tweet, they don't write in complete sentences, and they don't read. Now, I don't have any first-hand experience because I haven't taught any of you, but I'm sure
that's not true of your students on this campus, but just generalizing.
Students in general, and people in general, that people don't read like they used to. They don't sit down and read the New York Times anymore, which is why the New York Times and then most print media is having problems. It seems to me that the whole approach of aletheia is 30-page articles, in-depth reporting on things, which people don't seem to want. So how do you, in an age of short attention spans and tweets, how do you have contextualized reporting that does what the New York Times did, which is a very expensive thing to do?
Hugely expensive. I mean, the commitment to that one story, that's not even the headline on the front page, but buried there. 5 reporters, the archives had to be exposed and redone. They went back to this historical context to do it. Some of the answer lies actually with the public. I mean, one reason that, even though I teach at a research university, I believe in liberal arts education, is that if the citizenry is exposed to the kind of critical thinking that we emphasize at universities like this, when they see a story that's superficial, when they see this photo by Kevin Carter, they're thinking, my God, that captivates me, but there's got to be something more. I mean, sometimes the news cannot bear the responsibility of doing all the in-depth stuff, right? It's also the hope and dream that if you put it in the right way, if you establish at least the truth in the wider sense, that people will go after it, right? They've got the resources to do it, and I'm going to find out myself about this story. That's, in effect, what's happened with WikiLeaks. There are a few reporters that use it wholesale. My God, I've got 2 million of these, my resource. They don't even have to, this long-term investigation, trying to find the story, closed doors, etc., inaccessible information. So they turn it into a celebration of what the technology delivers. But I'm thankful that there are still those who say we've got to do more. Maybe this is a resource that will sustain us. See, the news media say, you're asking the question, why don't the news media produce stories of this substance, right? Why don't they say our old definition of accuracy is just too superficial, it's been assaulted theoretically, epistemologically, and it doesn't work anymore? Or that's an old Western definition of facticity, of raw mirror of reality data, and the world is too complicated for that. We still need the accuracy, let's say, of the stock market, the football scores or whatever it is, but that's only the beginning. So as the press starts thinking about this, and we have to adjust our definition of truth to something that's more international in context. So many of our stories are transnational, they require a world mind. They turn the blame, is that the right word, back on us. You're not interested in international news, right? We try to deliver it, but can't maintain our ratings or wherever our acceptance in the public arena. So instead of your question, and it was broad enough to include us in education, or families with their children, or religious groups in their religious education. But the problem is how we can develop critical consciousness in our society as a whole. Now, what does encourage me is that people seem to recognize, even though you've stated it accurately, that is, at an immediate age of short snippets of attenuated attention span, of bouncing from one 10-second spot or idea to another, there is, I believe, overall, the ability still to recognize when it's done right. If we say truth as authentic disclosure means, I've got it, now I see it. The aha experience, right? The epiphany. That belongs to the human race. We've always said, in spite of all the ruptures in journalism technologically, the good papers, radio stations, television, cable, will survive, right? Because people recognize underneath. You just have to have it. In the same way, we like to believe education will always be, I'm an educator, public will always realize we're crucial. But there's enough evidence of that, that still, you can't feel hopeless about it or nihilistic, that those who do it right end up still gaining an audience of appreciation. This is the way it should be done. NPR in our country is in the United States, is the only public media system and tends to go for longer stories. That's part of the issue. and has a way of asking questions that seem a bit more substantive than just the action on the surface. And as far as journalists are concerned, they would rather work there than any broadcast media in the United States. And people listen to it and understand its quality. Ooh, it's a good question. I'd like to go on some more. Any others like that, or better answers to that question than I gave?
I was going to add, since he's mentioned Twitter, a lot of what set Al-Jazeera apart in coverage of in the coverage of Egypt in particular was their correspondence use of Twitter.
Yeah.
So in terms of that sort of, I mean, in this case, it would at least appear, perhaps superficially, that the technology actually works towards, because it enables correspondence to bring forth, what's happening while it's happening in ways that are perhaps not that traditional media are not able to do.
No, that's a good insight. Rather than just saying the Arab Spring was carried on by Facebook, social media, Twitter, etc., you're expanding that analysis that we're now talking of people on the ground who may be part of the revolution themselves, who are there because they're trying to come to grips with transformation to a democracy. And there have been some movements like that. That is, if we had reporting that arose from the public and that actually represented the way the public thought about issues and what they're concerned about, rather than this highly expert, super professional class that asks the mayor and the superintendent of schools and the head of the corporation what they think. But closer to the ground, where's the people movement going and what are they doing? Al Jazeera English, for its since 2006, has bought into this philosophy that the world is a hugely complex place, and that even if CNN has 1,600 employees and they're sent all over what they consider to be their universe, they don't know the languages, the history, the culture in enough places to be representatives of this public journalism. So they've hired 300 what we would call freelancers, saying from a journalism point of view, you're uncertain about this because they don't have responsibilities to management as it moves up the ladder, who's going to edit it, etc. Is this authentic insight? But their argument is that we now have people in 109 countries who are on the spot, who report periodically to us, not just when there's a catastrophe, right, and we send our crews there to cover it, but to try and get inside the life and dynamics of the people themselves, and more about health and education and food and a broader agenda than just the narrow political one. Whether this is going to prove in the long run to be quality journalism that's better than the BBC or CNN is a question, but it responds to this, right? The people who now can run these technologies, because they're not spectacularly sophisticated and enormously expensive to maintain, to get them to speak on the street while it's happening and maybe closer to the ideas that are driving the revolution. Perhaps that will be a way of engaging us better in the U.S., trying to operate with them. To what extent Twitter and Facebook are opening up the kind of discourse that democracy needs that's closer to authentic disclosure is still an open question, but it's worth following its progress and encouraging it.
Anyone else?
What do you think? Have we used up our time, Professor Fortner?
There's a question over there. Apparently not.
He teaches, I guess you're on his 75-minute business, right? So he can go on for 75 minutes with no problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you spoke tonight about truth in the context of new technologies in the media. Can you talk about the idea of aletheia within the context of time? Because technologies have altered fundamentally our experience of time, and although they're meant or initially to save us time, in essence we are running out of time. The more technologies evolve, or the more sophisticated they become, we somehow lose on the time end. And to get to truth, you require more time, and you require leisure time, or the ability to think deeply and investigate the issue, regardless of whether as a journalist, as a professional, or as an individual trying to arrive at the disclosure, the full disclosure that we seek.
Yeah, it's, the great insight and has several different dimensions to it. You probably hear from my own presentation a commitment to the liberal arts and the humanities as a whole. And one could listen to what I said and conclude that being a history major is the best way to get into the media. People who know history and understand history, like Iraq and Afghanistan, in covering it, tend to get closer to an understanding of the truth. Now, you're asking the fundamental question then. As Marcia McLuhan said, in a mass media age, it's the present in which we live. History and the future are collapsed into the present, the present, the present, the present. How do we, therefore, in issues that do have, as a matter of fact, a long history, in which knowing the background, the culture, the historical experience of a people is crucial for understanding them now? I mean, you're asking the right question. How do we do that in an age in which the media have generated presentism instead of the historical mind that I tend to prize? There's a lot of work now in our field, as you know, on memory. It's just a version of the kind of question you're asking. That is, what has happened to memory? And to what extent can we revive it? And people working on it with the great issues of the 20th century, even, that tend to be forgotten or reduced and emasculated, such as the Holocaust. In holding some belief that even though our definitions of time are totally in evolution or change, there still is a concept of memory. I mean, in the great philosopher of the 18th century, the German Immanuel Kant, his argument was that all human knowledge is conditioned by time and space. That is, the way our minds are organized are a product of his history, so that the fact we're born now and not in 10,000 BC or that we're born in a specific location of space fundamentally conditions everything we do. As we're working on media ethics, Kant argued that time is an absolute, is eternal. So if I make a categorical imperative now, I assume it'll be true, like the law of gravity, as long as the world exists. He could do that in a Newtonian cosmology in which the world continued to repeat itself. But even though, I guess the point that I'm getting to, that still seems basic to me. That is, questions about space and the universal tonight was on the global character of technology. Even though there are revolutions in how we understand that, and having for us as professors and our students create a world mind, really a world mind, is tough. But it seems to me that even though there's a revolution in history and how we understand it, and McLuhan may be basically right, there has to be some concept of memory, of location, of what we ordinarily call history, a kind of historical consciousness, even though history itself is under revolutionary change. I'd love to discuss that one some more, too. Maybe we should call it a night, though, unless someone else wants to comment on this question. Robert, you're an old-fashioned historian, right?
Yeah, but my 75 minutes. And I'll hear about it tomorrow if I should go home.
Well, C. Wright Mills, in his book, The Sociological Imagination, says history is the shank of social studies. And I still believe that, but I guess I'm saying some kind of historical consciousness, rather than the Enlightenment's view that we live in progress and previous history is primitive, right, or medieval, or it's savage, or it's undeveloped, and we come up with these silly modernization theories that assume the world ought to follow the pattern of industrial nations. I mean, there's enough understanding of historical consciousness to at least put some of those major claims, forever delete them or eliminate them. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. When Al-Jazeera first started,
1996.
They hired a guy from New York, a journalist named Dave Marish, who was a journalist in New York for a very long time, a little bit of a rebel. They hired Dave, and Dave went on a talking spree. And he came to a lunch at the Committee to Protect Journalists in New York. There were people from Human Rights Watch and a bunch of other medias.
Right.
And basically he defended his taking this position with Al-Jazeera because he had been given a guarantee that Al-Jazeera management would in no way dictate to him as a journalist what he could and could not do.
Right.
Guaranteed.
Right.
Less than 2 years later, he quit because they were telling him what he could and could not do. So how have they changed from any other news media, a CNN, an MSNBC, a Euronews?
Yeah. No, that's an interesting story. The Al Jazeera had its roots basically in BBC reporters. The governments were trying, Saudi Arabia, for example, to develop a network, hire BBC reporters fundamentally, and they became disillusioned with a system that was still censorship in its orientation. And Qatar has said, this belongs to no government, and it's clearly true by the rebellion the other governments have shown to it. But does that mean they don't have the kind of censorship, rigid control that he's objecting to? It could be from the management system, that is, it's a massive international network now. The kind of bureaucratic mind, even though it's not politically censorious or belonging to a government, still demanding of its staff certain procedures and policies which he found to be objectionable. You hear some stories of that kind. The reality is that the Qatar government has put, the sheikh has put in $1 billion. Some of it because of the urge to make Qatar an international scene, to create, and really believes in international diplomacy and science and technology. But then to assume I'm giving you $1 billion plus, but it's yours. No control, no management from me, from the sheikh, probably defies human being, right? What we know. So it could be some influence on that level. I have a feeling the board of directors that have been appointed, even though, again, they were given apparently a blank slate, may take on a bureaucratic mind that leads to this sort of unhappiness. It's interesting to me that the opposite of what happened here, or one of the same, a similar event, is that Joel Rushing was our chief information officer on the ground in Iraq during the invasion. And if you watch more footage of this section of control room that I showed, he is smart. He is good. He's dealing with Al-Jazeera and all the press of the world. Why are you here, America, for oil? What's the point, etc.? I mean, he is really intelligent. Once the war, as the U.S. defined it, the invasion is over, he was told by the military, you are no longer an information officer for the U.S. You do not speak to anyone about Iraq, and he quit. He's now a reporter for Al-Jazeera. He has a book on it. And in 2006, when Al-Jazeera opened its 4 headquarters, he's on the staff in Washington, D.C. And he says, even though I'm the virile USA military spokesman who could answer questions from the doubting press and a hostile people, and I'm pro-American, the reality is that Al Jazeera got it right. Al Jazeera was still the best footage of the war. So here you have an example of somebody who's tried our media, has been at the center of it, and found Al Jazeera to be willing to listen to all opinion. One of the issues is how much Al Jazeera can carry all this fragmented opinion and still not themselves be held responsible for it. We do that in the university. You're here to speak. That is, it doesn't mean the university's endorsing everything you say. But often what happens contrary-wise in the content is not necessarily because it reflects Qatar or its management.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for coming, and I hope it's good.
This program is brought to you by AUBGTalks. For more, please visit us at aubg.bg/talks.